Wallace is fouled, and Wallace did. Wallace right at our chest. This has potential to be serious if they don't get between.
Some people have control. I don't.
Our chest is in the stands.
Players threw punches at fans, fans threw punches at players.
I've never experienced anything like that.
I'm never talking about again. Can you get that on camera?
On November 19th, 2004, an NBA game between the Detroit Pistons and Indiana Pacers turned into one of the most infamous moments in basketball history. What began as a regular season matchup between two of the best teams in the league soon spiraled into chaos, resulting in a brawl that extended beyond the players on the court and into the stands with the fans. This incident is often called the Malice at the Palace. The game was already surrounded by tension before it even began. The Detroit Pistons and Indiana Pacers had developed a fierce rivalry. The Pistons were the defending NBA champions, having won the title earlier in that year when they defeated the Los Angeles Lakers 4-1, and the Pacers was one of the few teams strong enough to challenge them in the Eastern Conference. Every game between these two teams was physical and highly competitive. Throughout the game, this intensity was visible. Players on both teams were pushing themselves hard, and you could feel the rising emotion between them. A lot was on the line, and frustrations were building up. It wasn't just another game. It was a battle between two teams trying to prove they were the best in the conference. With just 45 seconds left in the game, the Pacers were leading comfortably by a score of 97-82. The game was essentially over. The Pacers had already secured the win. Then, the moment that changed everything. As Ben Wallace of the Pistons attempted a layup, Ron Artest of the Pacers fouled him hard from behind. This foul was literally unnecessary given the score and the fact that the game was basically finished. Ben Wallace, a player known for his toughness and leadership, didn't take kindly to the hard foul. He immediately turned around and shoved Artest in the chest-neck area with both hands. The push was so forceful that Artest stumbled backwards, and it quickly ignited a confrontation between these two teams. We could say that Artest started this, but Wallace's shove was like a lightning match in a room full of fireworks. Both teams gathered around the two players and tempers started flaring. Players began pushing and shoving each other, and the referees and coaches rushed in to break things up before it got any worse. It seemed like things were calming down and the referees were close to restoring order on the court. But unfortunately, the situation was far from over. This shove from Ben Wallace was the spark that set off the explosion of frustrations both teams had been feeling throughout the game. The players had been engaged in a tough physical battle all night long, and this last-minute foul, even though the game was already over, was the final straw. And Ron Artest, known for his fiery personality, didn't respond to Wallace's shove with violence. Immediately, he instead walked away from the scuffle and laid down on the scorer's table. A strange move that confused both fans and players. To me personally, this just seemed like Artest's way of calming down and staying out of the fight because he knows how he is and his history. But for many watching, it came off as arrogant. Players on both teams, as well as fans in the arena, were still tense, waiting to see what would happen next. Now, for our broadcasters covering the game, this was a surreal moment. Normally, their job is to describe the action on the court, who scored, who made an assist, rebound, block, or how a team is performing. But in this case, they had to describe a fight breaking out right in front of them. Calling a brawl is not something most sports commentators are trained to do. and it added a level of unpredictability that was challenging to handle. Some broadcasters had experienced encore fights before, but the scale of what was about to unfold would be unlike anything seen before in the NBA.
That was like nothing I've ever seen. Because what made it so scary was the crowd kept surging down. And you just, one fight was broken up, another two started. It seemed like it went on for a half an hour when it maybe lasted 5 minutes.
One of the scariest parts of the whole incident was the involvement of the fans. Once Ron Artest laid down on the scorer's table, a fan in the stands threw a cup of soda at him. This was the moment that turned a bad situation into a full-blown disaster. Feeling disrespected and angry, Artest jumped from the table and charged into the stands, looking for the fan who had thrown the cup. Ironically, the person he first went after was the wrong guy, and what followed was utter chaos. Steven Jackson, one of Artest's teammates, followed him into the crowd to support him, and soon other players, security personnel, and fans were caught up in the melee. Punches were thrown, objects were hurled, and people were pushed around as the situation spiraled out of control. The brawl has started on the court, now involved fans in the stands, making it much more dangerous and uncontrollable. The crowd's involvement definitely made everything far worse. Some fans started throwing chairs, bottles, and anything they could find at the players. Others even rushed down to the court to try to join the fight. The entire arena seemed to explode in violence, and it took a very long time for security to regain control of the situation. Players were being hit with objects, fans were fighting with players and each other, and it seemed like there was no end in sight to the chaos. Once Artest and Jackson entered the stands, that's when things became even more chaotic. Multiple fights were breaking out at once. It was impossible to tell who was fighting whom. Some Pacer players were trying to get their teammates out of the stands, while others were getting involved in the fights themselves. Pistons players and coaches were watching in disbelief, trying to keep their own team under control as the situation escalated. Security guards and arena staff were overwhelmed, struggling to stop the violence. The brawl, which seemed to go on forever, actually only lasted a few minutes, but those minutes felt like an eternity for everyone involved. Eventually, the Pacer players were escorted off the court and into the locker room. But even as they left, fans continued to throw objects at them. The moment when Ron Artest charged into the crowd is the most infamous part of the entire brawl. It was this action that took the incident from an on-court altercation between players to a full-scale riot involving fans. Artest's decision to confront the fan who threw the cup was fueled by anger, and in that moment, he wasn't thinking about the consequences. His charge into the crowd set off a chain reaction of violence that the NBA would struggle to deal with for months. Once the first fight between Artest and the fans started, other fans jumped in, and soon the stands was filled with brawls. Steven Jackson was seen punching a fan, and other Pacer players were pulled into the crowd, either defending themselves or trying to help their teammates. Fans who had come to watch a basketball game suddenly found themselves in the middle of a dangerous fight, with punches, kicks, and flying objects all around them. Security struggled to break up the fights, and for a while, it seemed like the violence would never end. The scene was so chaotic that even experienced sports commentators and players said later that it felt unreal, like something out of a nightmare. The brawl only ended after players were pulled off the court and into the locker room, and the arena was cleared out. The NBA had to act quickly and decisively. The league's reputation was at risk, and there was a strong need to show that such behavior would not be tolerated. Almost immediately after the incident, the NBA launched an investigation to determine who was responsible and what penalties should be given. Just a few days later, after the Malice at the Palace, then NBA Commissioner David Stern made an official statement. In the message, Stern strongly condemned the actions of both the players and the fans, calling the event shocking, repulsive, and inexcusable. The NBA wanted to make it clear that this kind of behavior had no place in the league and that swift and harsh penalties would follow. The league handed out some of the longest suspensions in NBA history to the players involved. Ron Artest, who later changed his name to, of course, Metta World Peace, received the harshest penalty, a suspension for the remainder of the 2004-2005 season. This amounted to 86 games, 73 regular season games, and 13 playoff games. It was the longest suspension ever given for an on-court incident in NBA history at the time. Other players involved in the brawl were also suspended, though their punishments were not as severe. Steven Jackson, another player who had gone into the stands and fought with fans, was suspended for 30 games. Jermaine O'Neal, another key player for the Pacers, received a 25-game suspension, though it was later reduced to 15 games after he appealed. Ben Wallace, who had started the altercation by shoving Artest, was suspended for 6 games, while several other players from both teams were given shorter suspensions for leaving the bench during the fight. In total, the NBA handed out over 140 games worth of suspensions, almost 2 full regular seasons worth, one of the most significant punishments ever imposed in league history. Stern and the NBA leadership wanted to send a strong message. No matter how intense a game gets, players must always maintain their professionalism and keep their emotions in check. Violence would not be tolerated in any form, and anyone who broke the rules would face several consequences. One of the most significant reasons the NBA reacted so harshly to the brawl was to protect its image, the brand. At the time, the NBA was trying to broaden its audience and make basketball more appealing to families and younger viewers. The Malice at the Palace was a public relations disaster that painted NBA players as out of control, and it risked alienating fans. Commissioner Stern knew that if the league did not respond strongly, it could damage the reputation of the NBA for years. The NBA also implemented new rules and security measures in the wake of the incident. For one, the league required more security at games, especially in arenas near the court where players and fans could interact. The NBA also worked closely with arena staff to ensure that fans who behaved inappropriately were dealt with quickly and effectively. Additionally, the NBA put new emphasis on promoting professionalism among players. It wasn't just about playing basketball anymore. It was about representing the league, both on and off the court. The league began to focus more on how players presented themselves to the public, and there was an effort to make sure that everyone involved in the NBA, from the players to the coaches to the fans, understood the importance of maintaining a positive image. The brawl's aftermath left lasting scars on both the Pacers and the Pistons, but the effects were felt far beyond just those two teams. Players' careers were changed, team dynamics shifted, and the NBA itself was forced to reevaluate how it handled player behavior and fan interactions. For Ron Artest, the brawl and his suspension had a profound impact on his career. Before the Malice at the Palace, Artest was known as one of the best defensive players in the league, and he was a rising star. But after the incident, he became infamous for his role in the fight. His image was tarnished, and he faced criticism from fans, the media, and even fellow players. Though some incidents after the fight didn't help his case either. And even though Artest later worked hard to redeem himself, even winning an NBA championship with the Los Angeles Lakers 6 years later in 2010, the brawl remained a significant part of his legacy and is often the first thing that comes to mind when you see his face or hear his name. Steven Jackson also faced challenges after the brawl, though he continued to play in the NBA for several more years. His involvement in the fight hurt his reputation. Jackson was known as a passionate and sometimes volatile player, and the brawl only reinforced that image. Jermaine O'Neal, who had been one of the best players on the Pacers, saw his career take a downturn after the brawl. The suspension and the fallout from the incident seemed to weigh on him, and although he continued to play at a high level for a few more years, his career was never quite the same after that night. One of the biggest losses for the Pacers was the retirement of Reggie Miller, one of the greatest shooters in NBA history. Miller had been the face of the Pacers for years, going all the way back to 1989, and he was already planning to retire at the end of the 2004-2005 season. And the brawl ruined his final season, and Miller ended his career without the championship he had long sought. After his retirement, the Pacers lost their leader and never regained their status as a top team in the league. In the years following the brawl, the Pacers roster was broken up as the team tried to rebuild. Ron Artest was traded to the Sacramento Kings after the 2005 season, and Steven Jackson was also traded away to the Golden State Warriors. The once promising Pacers team was no more, and the franchise entered a long period of mediocrity. In contrast to the Pacers, the Detroit Pistons were able to recover from the brawl and continue their strong play. Although they lost Ben Wallace for 6 games, the Pistons had a deep and talented roster that allowed them to stay competitive, even without one of their best players. The Pistons went to finish the 2004-2005 season with a 54-28 record, good enough for the second best record in the Eastern Conference. Despite the distractions from the brawl, the Pistons made it all the way to the NBA Finals that season. They faced the San Antonio Spurs in a hard-fought series, but ultimately lost in 7 games. While the brawl had a lasting impact on the Pacers, the Pistons were able to move past the incident and remain one of the best teams in the league for several more years. The Malice at the Palace was a turning point in NBA history. It disrupted the intense rivalry between the Pistons and the Pacers, and the consequences were felt for years. For the Pacers, the brawl marked the beginning of the end for a once promising team. The suspensions and fallout led to the breakup of their roster and the early retirement of their star, Reggie Miller. The Pistons, on the other hand, were able to recover and continue their winning ways, reaching the NBA Finals again despite the brawl. But the incident forever changed how the NBA handles player behavior, fan interactions, and the overall security at games. The league's response emphasized professionalism and maintaining a positive image, ensuring that a similar incident would never happen again. The legacy of the Malice at the Palace is a reminder of how quickly emotions can spiral out of control, and how the actions of a few can have long-lasting effects on the many. It remains a significant event in the NBA's history, influencing both the rules of the game and the culture of the league to this day.